Welcome to the Strategy and Leadership Podcast, the podcast that brings you practical advice, lessons, and stories from senior leaders and thought leaders from around the world. The Strategy and Leadership Podcast is brought to you by SME Strategy, working with organizations around the world to create and implement their strategic plans. To learn more, visit SMEstrategy.net. And now, your host, Anthony Taylor.
Hey there, folks. Welcome to today's episode of the Strategy and Leadership Podcast. My name is Anthony Taylor, and today I'm joined with Derin McMains. He is a former professional baseball player turned director of mental performance at ReliaQuest. He's worked with organizations like the Seattle Mariners, San Francisco Giants, and the Arizona Diamondbacks, all around mental performance. And I'm super excited to have him on the podcast today to talk about how we can translate those skills into professional life. Derin, how's it going today?
Anthony, it's going great. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity today. Definitely looking forward to this opportunity to share.
Honestly, it's my pleasure. It's so I have a life goal of going to every major league ballpark. I'm at like 16, and I don't think that there is a sporting or physical feat harder than hitting a baseball. And add to that you've got, tens of thousands of screaming fans. I can't imagine what that was like, as a career, and then going into it as a profession to say, hey, how can we help people build that mental toughness in those, crunch time situations? So as a layperson, it's incredibly fascinating. But why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about your journey, how you got to here, how you got to the business that you're in, and then I'll just ask you some questions from there.
So yeah, professional baseball player for 7 seasons beginning in 2001. And then because of injury, retired in 2008, and then went into coaching and managing. So I coached and managed professionally in the San Francisco Giants organization as well. But it was during that time when I realized the importance and the value of mindset. As an athlete, I knew it, but I didn't really engage in it because at that time, thinking and focusing around sports psychology was more, I felt, at least at that time, was like for the weak, people that couldn't handle pressure, right? And so I stayed away from it. And then when I started coaching and managing, and I think it became more normalized, I realized, wow, there's real value in training your mind, and you don't have to be sick to get better, right? So how can we operate from a more proactive standpoint? And so from that, went back to school, got the degrees that I needed to get, got the education that I needed to get. And from that point, rolled out the mental performance program with the Giants, had a little pit stop at the University of Notre Dame, helped them roll out their mental performance program there. And then, as you mentioned, with the Mariners, and now currently with the Arizona Diamondbacks, I'm consulting with them. And I can tell you, it's funny, you talked about hitting and the challenge of hitting. I think there's like a 4-step process when we think about mindset of what it takes to hit a fastball at the major league level, right? And I go through, it's kind of this process: learn, control, plan, commit, right? It's kind of 4 steps. And so for me, you're always learning from what just happened. Get control of yourself after that, right? Control of your emotions. Doesn't mean suppress them, just means get control of yourself, get in the space you need to get to. Then have a plan, right? Like, what's the plan going forward? Like in this case, in baseball, be like, I'm expecting a fastball, or I'm expecting a breaking ball, whatever it might be. And then it's all out commitment. It's going all in. It's selling out. It's like being willing to lose with plan A, right? And so you think about, how does that work in life? It's really the same thing. Whether you're going into a presentation, you're meeting with a prospect, you're meeting with a customer. Hey, learn, prepare, right? Learn, get control of yourself, right? Get in the space you need to get to. What's your plan? And then go for it. It's the same 4 steps. So, and I also consult now with some NFL players, and it's funny. And I got to kind of carry over those skills from baseball right into working with football players. Because you think about it, they got 40 seconds between every play. It's the same thing: learn, control, plan, commit. And so I think it's just defining what those 4 steps are for you that I think any person can benefit from going forward.
That's awesome. So let's take it back. Okay. You are a professional ball player. You are, reaching the end of your career. Congratulations, by the way. And you say, okay, well, maybe there's something to this, performance mindset. What was one of the things that surprised you going through that journey? Not just recognizing, hey, the importance of it, but as you understand the nuance of it, what was one of the couple of the aha moments that really surprised you along that way?
I think the biggest thing that surprised me was how inputs become outputs, like not being intentional in what I was reading, what I was watching, what I was listening to, whatever those types of things, like not realizing how those end up impacting, I mean, at the deepest level, our identity, but definitely our perspective and our thoughts. And so it was during that time where I went, wow, I need to be more intentional on not watching the news, right? I mean, it's negative 24/7, those types of things. Or, hey, if I'm going to listen to a podcast, listen to something like this, it's actually going to help me. It's going to pour something into me that I think, might help me improve my work later. And so I think the biggest realization was just how to be more intentional in controlling those inputs. So I'll have, I guess, be more intentional in my outputs, right? Because I think most of us, myself included, it's like, oh, I can handle it. Oh, I can watch this. I can listen to this. This isn't going to impact me. Oh, I'm going to engage in the water cooler negative talk or whatever. Or if I listen to this, it ain't going to hurt me. Whereas realizing, like, hold on, man, if everything matters, which I believe it does, then how can I be more intentional in those types of things? And then obviously the biggest one for me, I call like invisible anchors or invisible elevators, which are the people that you surround yourself with, right? Because you're going to take on essentially the thoughts and the behaviors of probably the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And so just being intentional, like, hey, how do I cultivate these behaviors of people that I admire and I respect the way they go about their business, because ultimately those are the people that are going to pour into my life too.
I'd take it back just so I understand, like the idea of inputs become your outputs contextually makes sense. Like I believe everybody has heard about that, but in the context of like high performance and mindset, what is the context or what is the frame? So I said, hey, as it relating to how you view things, is it in reference to your training? Is it in reference to your habits? Is it in reference to the like learn control thing that you talked about? Like where does that inputs become output? What bucket does that fall into in the context of world-class mindset?
Yeah, great question. So I always walk people through this acronym IPTEA, essentially, and we'll just work from the bottom up. So A stands for actions. Like, why did I do that thing? Like, why am I doing those things? Actions. Well, I can tell you, let's work backwards. You did that thing because you felt like it, right? It's our emotions that influence our actions. So that's the E. And then you go, well, why was I feeling that certain way? Why was I having those emotions? Well, that goes to the T. That's our thoughts, right? How we think determines how we feel, and how we feel influences what we do. Well, the next question was like, why the heck was I thinking that thing? Like, why was I having those particular thoughts? Well, that goes to the P, the perspective, right? So our perspective, how we see the world determines how we think about it, right? And how we think about it determines how we feel, and how we feel influences what we do. Well, and the last question is, why the heck do I see the world that way? Like, why is my perspective that way? Well, that goes to our identity, right? That's the I. Like, so how I see myself determines how I see the world, right? And then it kind of goes through thoughts, emotions, and actions. And so the reason why I share that, and specifically in this context, is because when you think about all the stuff you're reading, listening, watching, all those things, like you're pouring into either your identity or your perspective. Is going to start to shape your worldview and shape situations in certain in moments, right? And so with that being said, the intentionality around like, how do you want to see this thing? Right? Because it's like being a high performer is a trained skill, right? It's not just some people are born with it and some aren't. No, it's like, well, if you go into a moment and you quote unquote, choke or don't perform well, it's like, well, how did you view that situation? Well, I viewed it, or if I didn't get this deal, if I didn't lock this thing down, then I was done. Well, hold on, let's step back. Are you really done? And then you just start unpacking those layers, and then you start to help people reframe certain situations, which are ultimately going to impact your thoughts, emotions, and then ultimate actions. And so that's what I'm talking about when you think about inputs, because we're always feeding into that identity and perspective piece. And then when you think about how it all comes out in the end, thoughts, emotions, and actions, that's how it tends to come out.
I'm a kind of a visual learner, and the way I'm thinking about it. So in the back of my head, I'm like, what makes somebody become a professional athlete? So there's like the professional athletes, and then there's the really good professional athletes. And in my brain, it occurs as a cycle of the mental game and then the performance, because like you have to be like a kid who's like, okay, I want to be a good thing. So you have the IPTEA, and then you're like, okay, cycle, and then cycle, and then cycle, mental game, then performance, mental game, then performance, mental game, then performance. Does that resonate with how you learned it, or how? Okay.
Yeah, totally. And I think that was one of the, I think, benefits of being a professional athlete first is, as I was going through school and I was learning these things, I was like, that makes sense. Oh, that, like, I was able to put words around things that I maybe experienced, but didn't quite know how to articulate. And And I'll tell you here's the crazy thing, Anthony. This is the crazy part, right? So I tell people this all the time. Like, you don't have to be confident to perform well. You don't even have to view that situation in the quote unquote right optimal state to perform well. You just have to do the thing, right? And I give this example where it's like, I remember there was a friend of mine who was trying out for a cheerleading squad, like a college a dancing or whatever. And she knew she wasn't going to make it. She's like, I'm not good enough. There's no way I'm going to make this, right? She goes, does it, makes the team. And then it's like, well, does confidence matter? And it's like, well, I guess not. I mean, it's nice. Don't get me wrong. It's nice. But what I learned along the way is, like, when you think about that cycle, I think some people get hung up because they're like, well, I don't believe I can do it. Well, that's okay. Just do it. Just go for it. It's like, well, I'm not confident. Well, don't get hung up on a feeling. Get focused on the action, right? And so that cycle, it kind of goes either way, because if I don't see myself as someone that can do it, but then I end up doing it, well, hold on. Now the action, now it goes the other way, because now maybe I am someone that can do that, right? And so it's like, it's so interesting, and that's why it's so ethereal at times, right? But that's why I love coaching so much, because there is no blanket like, this is how you do it, go for it. I think everybody needs a coach, and I think it just helps a lot of us. I say this all the time. You're the expert of yourself. You know what you need to do, but sometimes we just got to get it out of our heads and out in front of us. You talked about being a visual learner. Get it out of my head, get it in front of me, so I can look at it, I can unpack it, and then I can see what's helpful, and then operate on that, and I can throw away the rest of it. And so, yeah, so that's how I kind of see it. But I loved your picture of it, but it definitely does it gets very gray, very ethereal when you start thinking about, what do you need and what do you don't need. But that's why I think, everybody's individual, and that's why they need a coach.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So he's talk about I can't remember, Yogi Berra, 98% of success is showing up, I think. And so you got to show up and do the thing. And then, in the context of strategic planning, which is our domain, people think, hey, it's just a bunch of actions. Well, actions will get you far better than no actions, but then the right actions will get you slightly further. And then that's the actual whatever those modifications are. But in order to be able to do that, you need to see outside of yourself. And so I just think it's just fascinating. Like, there's the mental game, the physical game, and how the mental game can take you out of the physical game more than anything. But before kind of going around in circular logic, I had a question. Let's say you go into one of these organizations, because every organization is different. Every person knows their business or whatever, situation. What does, and without giving any secret sauce away, what does a typical performance program look like? How do you get people to maximize their professional edge in an area in the world where it's just getting more and more competitive?
Yeah, great question. First and foremost, leadership has to be bought in, right? Those that are at the top have to be bought into what you're doing, because it is new. And when you're rolling out any program, if in the world of sports, the head coach or the general manager, but in any business, if the CEO or the people that are in charge, if they're not into it and see the value of it, good luck, right? That's what I first say. But second, I always think about, with any program, there's kind of 4 steps that goes into it, right? It's first, there's the awareness phase, where it's like, what is this? I don't even know what this is, and why does it matter to me? So it's all around creating awareness, and awareness happens through consistency and simplicity, right? Being consistent with simple messages. And simplest way I would say it is how you think impacts how you feel, and how you feel influences how you perform. Really simple. So how can we think a little better? And people go, oh, okay, I can see that, right? Then after you start to gain awareness, then there's the adoption phase, right? So you start creating strategies on how you can help people adopt these things, and so they can make them more consistent in their life, right? And so whether it's in team meetings or whatever it may be, hey, here's some adoption strategies that you can make it just more consistent. So it's not just one person, myself or other mental performance coach or performance program leading it. It's now being adopted by leaders and individual teams. And then that's what it kind of goes to phase 3, which is ownership, when they begin to own it and they start coming back to the performance person or the performance coach saying, hey, here's what I was thinking, what our team might need right now. So now they're coming to you with ideas, and now you get that relationship going back and forth. And what happens is, when leaders at each individual stage own it and they start sharing it with their teammates, guess what? Their individual contributors, or those teammates, they're going through the same process. They're getting their awareness raised. They're now adopting these strategies. They're now ownership. And then that kind of leads to the fourth and final stage, which I would say is expansion, right? It's just flat out expansion. How do we make it as good as it can be, where where as many people as you can are owning this approach to performance, where they know their mindset matters. And then that's when, like, for me, what I've seen over and over again is when the magic happens, right? Is when you get the ownership at the individual level, and it turns into expansion. It shows up in everything that you do, and it's just the way you operate.
All right. So awareness, adoption, ownership, expansion. Again, it aligns with when we see like strategic plans, people creating a vision. But I think, again, it's like the vision is not a thing. The vision is a mindset. The vision is a possibility. The vision is, whatever you're trying to accomplish. And then people have to put themselves in that right contextual place and be like, hey, like, are we the kind of people that can do it? Do we see it as possible? What are the thoughts that are going into our heads as we do that? How do we feel about it? And then actually, show up and make it happen. So I definitely see a lot of, maybe not trying to hit 80-mile-an-hour change up, but driving forward a strategic plan, an organizational vision, cultural change. It all sounds the same, or not same, but similar pieces.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to share about that?
No, I think it's great. It's interesting how they all kind of line up, right? When it's like there are phases, and historically there's reasons why things work, right? There's a process to it, there's a strategy to it, and there's always intentionality, right? I think it's Vince Lombardi said the man on top of the mountain didn't climb there, right? And so there's intent behind everything that you do.
Cool. Well, as we finish up, I'd love to ask you, and is there one either mantra or, like, I just think, going into the batter's box, what you do to get yourself calm and ready. Let's say you're going into a speech or you're going into a meeting and you're just like, hey, I need to get my brain right. I need to get my mind right. What do you recommend to people that just as a quick and easy way of gaining their mental focus, mental clarity? Is there something that you recommend to people to get them in the zone, so to speak?
Yeah, I think people aren't probably going to love this, but the first and foremost is preparation, right? I mean, ultimately, if you're not prepared, that voice of self-doubt is going to get really loud when you step into the batter's box, when you step into the meeting, whatever it is, right? And so it's like, what I've learned, and this is me learning coming over into the business space, is you got to protect the time before your most important meetings to give yourself an opportunity to prepare. I see a lot of leaders and executives, they fill up their calendar just one meeting after the next. And it's like, sure, if that's what you got to do, and I understand you got to be in a lot of different places, but I would make sure to really protect that time before those most important meetings, and just write in their preparation on your calendar. Like, so that's what I would say, is like, get to that space. And then when you think about the importance of mantras, right? And just a simple thing that you can tell yourself by going into, any environment. I would say this first, it's got to be personal, right? It can't be just like, oh, I read this on a wall, and so I'm going to use it, right? It's got to be precise. So personal, precise, too. Precise meaning as few words as possible. Like if you're going to recite a 18-word thing, good luck, when your emotions are running high and you're excited. So try to keep it as precise as possible. And the last thing I would say is it's got to be positive, right? Positive, this means forward focus. It doesn't always mean like everything's going to be great. I mean, maybe that's what you need. I don't know. But I say positive is forward focus, meaning it's not about what you don't want to happen. It's about what you do want to happen, right? And so it's just, our brain doesn't understand the word don't, right, Anthony? So if I said, hey, Anthony, don't think about that pink zebra, guess what? You and all the listeners are thinking about the pink zebra, even though I said don't, right? And so anyway, it's just about, personal, precise, positive mantra that is specific to you, right? And so I think whatever that means for somebody, like that's what I'd have them think about going into it.
I love that. So a couple of things I want to really highlight on is this performance culture of doing. That what I heard is it's preparation, but sometimes preparation is do nothing. Like just be in the place to be prepared. I love mantras, of course. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. If you show up to a meeting unprepared, you just start shitting on people around you, and you blame other people where you're really just deflecting what you should blame on yourself. When I was a goalie, not at a high level, but the thing I would always say is like, good position, good decisions. Good position, good decisions. And that would just ground me to just be like, okay, I don't need to worry about stopping the ball. I just need to make sure I'm in a good position, good decision. So whatever works for you, have something and just like clear out some of the noise and just focus in there. And I just love that, personal, precise, positive, and make it yours. Like whatever team you're leading, just have something that is yours, like not like a Ted Lasso, not a Let It Rip from The Bear. If you watch that, just whatever makes sense for you, and then just own it. So we have a saying in our family, it's kick all the butts. So anybody can use that if you want. Derin, it's been such a pleasure. Where can people connect with you? Where can they learn more about your work? Where can they just like tap in if they want to improve their mental game, their mindset?
Sure. Yeah. You can follow me on Instagram, and it's, DMAC_mindset. Also actually host a podcast called the No Show Dogs podcast, where we bring on top performers from sports industry specifically. And we talk to them about, hey, what are strategies that they're using in sports that entrepreneurs and business leaders can use as well. So that's another thing that people can tune in and hear what we're talking about.
That's freaking awesome. I love that. Derin, thank you so much for sharing. It's been a blast. I learned some stuff. I've got so many more like tips and tricks, and I know there's no shortcuts, but it's like doing the continuous thing over again that makes you great. And congratulations on, what you built and all the best moving forward.
Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate this. And again, appreciate the time to share. I really do.
It's my pleasure. Folks, my guest today, Derin McMains, who is the Director of Mental Performance at ReliaQuest. One of the things to just take away from this is just consistently preparing well so that you can perform when it's time. When it's performance time, the job is done. Like it's everything you do there, but nothing replaces just showing up. So don't let your brain sabotage what you think you can and cannot do. So action fire is better than knowledge on ice, something like that. Anyways, I appreciate you, Derin. Thanks for being here. Thank you, folks, for listening. A blast always. I really would love to hear what you're doing to improve your performance, whether at the team level, individual level. Holler at Derin on Instagram. Check out his podcast. I certainly will. This has been the Strategy and Leadership Podcast. Subscribe, follow, do your thing, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Strategy and Leadership Podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider giving us a review. We appreciate you listening and following along, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. And as Anthony says, until next time.